Welcome to the One Advantage podcast, exploring the intersections of peer power, culture, and agility. Your hosts, Mike Richardson, Jason Richmond, and Leo Bottari, co-founders of the One Advantage community of practice and advantage peer groups. For more information, please visit us at the One Advantage podcast.
Hey everybody, here we are again for another episode of the One Advantage podcast with my two best peer-powered agile culture buddies, Jason Richmond and Leo Bottari. Hi guys, how you doing?
Great, Mike. How are you?
Here we are again. We got a great topic today, everybody, all around the topic of customer centricity, being centric on your customers. That's going to be a great conversation. But as usual, before we get going, let's just find out a little bit more about where everybody's been and what they've been up to. And let's go to you first, Jason. Where have you been? What have you been up to?
Well, Mike, this has been a whirlwind week. Excited about going into the holiday weekend. I've actually been in 4 states in 5 days.
Wow!
And, working with clients, working on agility, working on culture, working on leadership. It's been a whirlwind, but pretty successful. Customer-centric week for me, my friend.
Awesome. And man, there's a lot of need for peer-powered cultures of agility. So the phone is ringing more and more, everybody. And Leo, what about yourself? Where have you been? What have you been up to?
Well, interestingly enough, I have been working from home all week for once.
No, that can't be real.
It is true. But June is nasty. June is a lot of travel, everywhere from Anchorage to Saco, Maine, and everywhere in between. It is going to be a absolute whirlwind. So,
Anchorage.
Yep.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why you've been at home is you've been doing a certification class for your peer innovation program, correct?
Yeah, just finished it on Tuesday night, and we had 9 really tremendous executive coaches go through the program. 9 people, 4 different countries. It's now offered in, of course, 3 different languages now, given the folks there. And it's just, it was wonderful. It was a great experience. And I wrote about it in a piece today because I think what was really important for those folks was, we'd have this conversation. They would say to me, hey, you created this stuff. We're never going to be able to do this like you. And I basically replied, I said, I don't want you to do it like me. Right. I want you to embrace your gifts and your experiences, and you present it in a way that I never could. Yeah, and once they kind of connected that and they start looking at these models and really connecting it to their own life and their own worlds, it's been transformative in that regard. And and all of that is just a great learning experience for me as well. So it was a terrific program. And I got the next cohort starting in July.
Yeah. So, and we just finished the 6th episode of Leo's course inside of the One Advantage community as well, everybody. We're just going to dot a few I's and cross a few T's on that and launch it in the next couple of weeks. So watch out for that. I've been having a blast juggling a lot of different things, writing and speaking. And not least of all, Leo and I were together up in Sundance. Yes, the Sundance Resort, famously of Robert Redford, fame. We were up there both together with another peer group organization working on peer innovation stuff. And so watch this space because there's some exciting things brewing up there as well. So here we are, everybody. We're going to talk about customer centricity. Everybody talks about, being customer centric, but what does that really mean in the modern day and age? And how does it align with a peer powered culture of agility in those organizations that lead the way with that? We hear more and more organizations saying that, we used to say the customer is number one, but actually now we say the employee is number one. So kind of how do we square that circle a little bit? Jason, when you think about being customer centric, I mean, what kinds of things come up for you, and what do you see your clients focusing on?
Well, first of all, Mike, this is probably one of my most passionate topics. Right? Something the One Advantage prides on is our relationships with customers, clients, the level of engagement, the length of time, the retention of customers, and really the growing hand in hand. Right? I'm living proof that my team, our organization, what we do has gotten better and better and better as our customers get better and better and better. right? Where the best practice sharing, the bringing the innovative ideas. But to answer your question, if I have to summarize customer centricity, it means the ability to understand your customer situations, what perceptions they have of you and others, and what their expectations are.
Yeah.
Those three key components, I think, are drivers of customer centricity. Really understanding their business, their situations, their clients, what they're involved with, the perceptions they have of you and others in the marketplace, and then the expectations they have within a partnership. Keep those things up front.
Yeah, I love the idea of the use of the word perception, right? And how, how do they perceive their situation? How do they perceive their future? How do they perceive their business model, their issues, their challenges, their opportunities? And as you said, how do they perceive their relationship with you? Correct. And their ability to sort of lean into all of that? Leo, what do you think about when you think about all of this?
It really takes me back to work that I started doing long before, the power of peers and all of that. And that was essentially work that I did having my own agency or working for large firms and public relations firms and doing communications for various companies of all sizes. And I learned early on that you have to get, and this kind of threads a little bit on what Jason talked about, you've got to have clarity on what success looks like on both sides, because there is nothing more frustrating than, let's say we put together a campaign and we feel great about it. And all of a sudden we go into the client, we talk about the results, and they're going, yeah, it just kind of didn't hit the mark. And we're like, whoa, wait a minute now. But that was, I'd put that on us. We have to have, when we talk about being customer centric, real clarity about what success looks like. What are those outcomes? What we need to look each other in the eye right at the beginning and not make assumptions about what those things are. And I think when we can get that level of clarity up front, and we have a working relationship where we keep, our attention squarely on the process, of course, but then making sure that we have some clear understanding of what outcomes we're all looking for. That is huge. And
And as we help our listeners think about how they can be more customer centric with their customers, of course, where my head goes, it goes back to sort of the days of lean and Six Sigma and total quality management, all that kind of stuff, where it was always a value chain towards the customer. And what is the customer value that ultimately gets created? What's the customer experience? It's all driven backwards from that customer centricity at that end of the spectrum. And what happened, everybody, as we morphed to agile, and I like to say agile is the new lean, by the way. It's going to be as ubiquitous. It already is. The difference when we morphed from lean to agile is what Leo was saying. Agile is about testing and verifying that customer value earlier, not later. Don't wait for the big bang day when we finally launch that thing and there's disappointment in the customer's mind because you never really tested and verified anything. Test and verify sooner, and then iterate and iterate and iterate. Google says launch early and iterate often. Now, to do that, you've got to be able to have a productive relationship with failure, because you're going to fail, you're going to make mistakes. But if it's smart failure, not stupid failure, it isn't really failure, it's learning. And as long as you coach your customer to be okay with that, then they will actually get more value more quickly. Jason, I see you nodding your head there. What are your thoughts?
I think you're right on. And again, you're touching, you're even touching on the topic we said earlier about the relationship between employee centric and customer centric, right? I think you're driving employee centricity. Employee comes first if you're ingraining that deep value of understanding your customer, right? I think they go so much hand in hand. I mean, we tell people all the time that, one of our missions and what we try to accomplish is to help companies, organizations, maintain a competitive advantage in their marketplace.
Yeah.
Well, how is any partner or vendor ever going to do that if they're truly not customer centric? How we do it, how I do it at Ideal Outcomes, is that when we put the customer in the center of any new strategy that we're thinking about or implementing. We take into account how our business decisions are impacting that customer experience, that customer journey, any type of process change, any type of touch point within the customer. All of these internal decisions, we don't make those decisions until we realize that it's going to enhance the journey with the customer going side by side.
Yeah. And of course, relatively speaking, Jason, you have a sizable team, a sizable firm for a training and education company, and yet compared to a big corporation, of course, it's small and nimble. Big companies, big corporations can really struggle with this, can't they? Where they've got so many employees in the value chain of ultimately providing customer value that somewhere in the middle of all of that, they lose the plot. And the customer value experience isn't where it needs to be. Leo, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, there's a few things that tie together here, right? There was a great book written by Hal Rosenbluth and Diane McFerrin-Peters called The Customer Comes Second. And this was during a time where the customer is always right and the customer's at the center of everything. And the bottom line is that your employees are the people serving your customers. And if you put your employees first, the customers and the clients become the big winner. Where it ties into agility, though, is think about it from the perspective, not just of the Southwest Airlines, people like that, but I think maybe the Ritz-Carlton is a great example of this, right? That employee empowerment, that employee centricity toward the customers makes you more agile. Because if I'm an employee of the Ritz-Carlton, Mike, and you're one of my guests, and you've got an issue, I have the power to do what it takes to take care of it in the moment, no questions asked, done. I don't have to say, hey, Mike, let me get back to you while I deal with 4 layers of bureaucracy that I've got to deal with. And maybe at the end of your trip, we can kind of help you resolve your problem, right? So that agility, I think really comes to the forefront when we start really putting our employees in a position to do what's right for their clients, do what's right for their customers.
I'm trying to come up with a comeback line of I'm the customer and Leo's, and I just can't come up with it. I'm so disappointed in myself, but I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, I think I can hear now several times where I've been doing workshops and things, and we've got to this place of the employee comes first, and well, does that mean the customer comes second? And which one should I really focus on, this one or that one? And what I say to people is, no. Let's not get confused here. It's always an and proposition. Yeah. There's always a value chain, and the person at the end of that value chain is always the customer. There's no confusion about that. It's the employees who are in that value chain that we're really saying it's supply and demand. If I want to meet the customer value demands, who supplies that? It's my employees who do that. And if I create this kind of almost paradoxical shift to employees come first, it just really pumps up the idea of, look, empower the employees to deliver value to the customer, like Leo was saying, in the moment, without needing to go upstairs to get a decision made. Let's just do it right here, right now. What do you think, Jason?
Well, I was just an example. We do an awful lot of work with sales organizations, right? And this is a hot topic right now in sales organizations, more virtual sales, more Zoom meetings, more Teams meetings in the sales, right? Core competency. So this idea of empowerment is a foundation of that, right? You have to empower your salespeople to do what's necessary, right? To really be engaged and bringing value to their customers. And the other couple components then that we add to this is you have to have customer-focused leadership then too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The leaders has to feel comfortable and have enough confidence that the sales force or the front-facing customer people, are making the right decisions. And we really boil it down to a couple things in regards to, how we communicate with that customer. I mean, if our communications with a customer is not transparent and it's not authentic, then we're not demonstrating customer centricity, right? And if from a sales leadership, a customer service position, from a support position, whatever role, whatever engagement you are having with that customer, that level of authenticity. I always tell my team, and I tell my customers this, there's never going to be any surprises. None.
Right.
If a customer is surprised, then there's a gap, right? There's something happened that the communication wasn't there. We should be on top of that and making sure that when it comes to business, there's no big surprise that comes back
I love
at
that.
us.
Yeah, no surprises, no excuses.
Yes.
Right. It's we take 100% responsibility for, your experience, et cetera. And, what strikes me here is this is easy to talk about. And we come across a lot of people who talk the talk. But the question is, in the moment of truth, when it really matters, does the talk get walked? Do they walk the talk? We see this in leadership, don't we? Right. We theorize about leadership, and in the moment of truth, leadership didn't happen. We see it about innovation. We theorize about innovation, and in the moment of truth, it didn't happen. Leo, in your work around peer power, we theorize about peer power, and then in the moment, if we're not careful, we don't have the right structure, the right factors for success. It just doesn't happen. What do you think, Leo?
Well, a couple things here. One is that you've got to be all in. There's no such thing as being 90% employee or customer focused or whatever. You've got to be 100% with it. When I had my own firm in the early 90s, I literally modeled it after Hal Rosenbluth's book, The Customer Comes Second. What happened during that time, I'll tell you a brief story. There was a client who verbally abused and was awful to one of our employees. And just because she didn't do anything wrong, he was one of those guys that was just a bully, just wanted to take a junior person out for a ride and just be terrible about it. He says, I'm going to call and we're going to get you fired, all this other nonsense, right? So she's telling me this, she's all upset and everything. So anyway, I got on the phone with the guy and I said, by the way, he started talking about other things, not even, I said, I just want you to let you know, we're not going to be working with you anymore. He says, what are you talking about? And I told him, and he says, well, it'll never happen again. I says, you're absolutely right. It won't, because we're done with you guys. I'll help you make the transition. We'll do whatever. Now I go back out to my folks and they're wondering if she's going to get fired. I'm like, no, we just fired him. Now all of a sudden they know you're serious, that even when it's going to cost us money in their regard, this idea of the employee comes first, the client comes second, is absolutely, we are true to that. And when you stay 100% in it, and by the way, I didn't lose a dime on that exchange because those employees rallied. I replaced that income in what seemed like nanoseconds. Okay. And the thing about it, I think also to your point, Mike, it's not only an and proposition. When you have CEOs, public companies who talk about their responsibility to deliver shareholder value, well, what does it take to do that? You have to build a culture that builds products and services that are good enough, delivered it well, take care of your customer. Correct. And when you do that well, you're going to get the kind of sales and profits and shareholders are going to win.
Exactly. It's the idea of multiple bottom lines, right? It isn't just a profit bottom line. It's a purpose bottom line. It's a community bottom line, and of course the internal community of your employees and how meaningful they're finding their work and how much learning and growth they get out of your work and your cultural environment. And what came to me as you were talking, Leo, and you were sort of re-leveling the playing field with that client and walking away, as it were, comes back to what you said, Jason, when we were teeing up this episode. It's a partnership mindset with your customers. And when the playing field is unlevel, like the story that Leo told, you're at least going to re-level it, right? Mm-hmm. And have an eye-to-eye conversation that say, hey, that's not partnership. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. Part of authenticity is having tough conversations, right? Any partnership, that doesn't mean there's no conflict. That doesn't mean there's not any disagreement. But it's how you work through that to collaborate and implement solutions, right? I tell my team, nobody is flawless, right? If we're not being innovative, if we're not bringing, if we're going to bring new ideas, if we're going to be innovative, if we're going to challenge the status quo, you're not going to operate if you're pushing the envelope to get better without mistakes. And it's not the mistake within a customer's mind that kills you. It's how you recover or handle that mistake.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line to me with customer relationships is putting them first in regards to continually challenging the status quo, bring higher quality products and services and deliveries to the table, and realize that there's risk to that. And if you stumble a little bit, it's how you react and how you overcome that stumble.
Yeah, I love that. Back in my aerospace days, I started out as a program manager of complex aerospace projects, and then obviously ended up sort of climbing the ladder and becoming an executive and a CEO of those kinds of businesses, not just projects. And indeed, you can't undertake a complex aerospace program for a blue chip customer like Boeing or Airbus or British Airways or United. You cannot undertake those things without experiencing failure, period. It's not going to happen. You got to recognize that you are going to have some mistakes and some failures. The key is to catch them small, catch them early, catch them fast so they don't become catastrophic. And then it's really about how the customer sees you respond to that. And I used to say to my teams all the time, we're better off to have had a problem and fixed it than to have not had a problem at all. Because now the customer saw us under a microscope, and the degree to which we transparently and authentically and courageously fixed it, dealt with it. And when we got stress tested, they saw how deep our resilience ran. And so now they have more confidence about our ability to absorb shocks in the future, and they can sleep a little bit more easily. Leo, your thoughts?
Just everybody's stories, whether it's Jason about surprises, the one you just told, all of it, it absolutely comes down to, I think one word that keeps coming over and over, and that's clarity. The more clarity you can create about process, about outcomes, about what success looks like, about all of it, is so important. And this is where so much of the work we do is about how do we get really intentional about creating that kind of clarity throughout everyone, right? Whether it's in the hierarchy, whether it's among peers, whether it's with our customers or clients, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, because especially listeners, if you're running a larger organization, if you're growing fast, it's amazing how unclear people can become very fast as you grow, and they lose the plot, which when you're a smaller company, it's small enough that everybody can be crystal clear. It's amazing how unclear it can become, and you lose the plot, and all of a sudden you're paying a price. Jason, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is anybody out there that engages with any type of customer coming out of this pandemic, if you haven't had a business review discussion with them, you're putting that client relationship at risk. It's their expectations. We've talked on this podcast about the great resignation and the reprioritization. Every company out there is also reprioritized. And if you're customer facing, and if you haven't had a customer expectation, a business review, those types of business conversations about what's changed in their world, their operations, their marketplace, then you're putting that client relationship at risk.
Yeah. So these are the kinds of things that we get into, everybody inside the One Advantage community. Come on in and join us. Excitingly, as you heard earlier, Leo is about to launch his 6-class peer innovation course inside the One Advantage community, which we're really excited about. And of course, we're about to put up a link to Jason's course that already exists around culture. And the three of us are actively working together with our brand new instructional designer that Jason has on his team, who joined us a couple of months ago, to put together our next video shoot that we'll be doing in a few months, and putting up a whole One Advantage course to complement our ebook that's about to come out. We've got a lot of exciting stuff taking shape, guys. Leo, you've got your new course coming. That's a really exciting thing.
It is. Yeah, just shot a little intro video yesterday. We'll get this all rolling next week, and really excited about it, because I think people are going to be really surprised at how relevant all this is going to be for, whether it's their executive leadership team or, for all their employees.
Yeah, and Jason, we got some really good stuff cooking around the culture course that we're working on as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you talk about traction, right? And continually moving forward. And again, everything we're doing, it falls in this topic. I mean, anticipating the needs of your customers, bringing new ideas, bring fresh approaches, fresh content to the table. If what's the definition of insanity? Continually doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. That's no different than what we do as a group, bringing new things to the table, with our customer in mind.
Yeah, and I think customer centricity, putting the customer value chain front and center for everybody. That is relatively speaking easy to talk about and hard to do, and it takes real courage to do it and to empower your people to do it. Leo, you were mentioning the Ritz-Carlton, and there are many other examples. I mean, this doesn't happen by accident, does it? This happens by design.
No question.
Yeah.
And by the way, I had you as a guest at the Ritz-Carlton, which presumably, would be a very good thing for you. So, that's where that was coming from there. But, I will say too that I saw something that might be of interest to our listeners. It was just a piece that recently ran in MIT Sloan's management review. It says it's time to tackle our team's undiscussables. And it really speaks to this notion of clarity. It speaks to this idea how easy it is to make assumptions about, oh, we're on the same page, or we've got this, we got that, and we don't talk about things specifically enough. We get that kind of clarity. It happens within our teams, it happens with our clients, and quite frankly, it happens in many cases in all our relationships. So I think the more that we can seek that out for ourselves and others, it's a important message.
Which is where everybody, a peer-powered culture of agility really comes into play, because the thing that turbocharges your ability to make discussable previously undiscussables is peer power and peer transparency and peer authenticity, and making it safe, Leo, for people to truly engage with that. Correct?
You bet. No doubt about it. You've got to have an environment where not only the environment's safe, but where people actually learn and get the skills in terms of how to leverage it.
Yeah, and you need a culture for that, Jason, right? And that, again, doesn't happen by accident either.
No, it does not. We've talked a lot about that. I mean, all this drives into the culture, right? Yeah. It setting the foundation with being employee and customer-centric is an actual example of a driver or a pillar of your culture.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of the key legs in the stool in this, to really create high performing culture. So I think without being employee and customer centric, your culture is going to suffer.
And everybody, here we are talking about things that don't happen by accident. Agility doesn't happen by accident either. And of course, that reminds me of many of the aircraft accident stories that I typically talk about in agility. And the famous one, of course, is Eastern Airlines, where it happened a long time ago in the 70s. The three crew in the cockpit are so busy fixing a bulb that they haven't noticed that somehow or other the autopilot has disengaged. The plane has been in an imperceptible descent for minutes, and eventually, unfortunately, has contact with the ground, and you're left with a smoking hole in the ground. If you're not careful, everybody, customer centricity can be like that. You're so busy fixing bulbs and fixing this and fixing that and fixing the other, you haven't quite realized that the customer-centric experience, value, proposition is in an imperceptible descent. And you don't wake up to the fact until you have an impact with the ground, and that really hurts. And so it's really about being more conscious, everybody, of perhaps what you might be unconscious about. What is really going on with your customer value, your customer experience, your customer centricity? And that's an important aspect of culture, Jason, for which a starting point has to be that you need to measure it in some way, shape, or form.
You do. And in Culture Spark, my first book with the culture model, part of the exercises and the tools we built, matter of fact, it's also on my website, it is a process or a template on how to start measuring and what you need to start looking at to understand what your current client journey is about. What is your current customer experience? And unless you analyze what that is, you can't implement any changes or any fixes. So take a step back and try to really get a clear diagnosis of what your customer experience is now. I often give a talk. That I title it, "Don't Let Your Systems Make You Stupid." and that talk is all about the ease of doing business.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes focusing on fixing bulbs, implements these processes and procedures that make it really difficult for customers to engage with us.
And you end up being a busy fool.
That's correct.
You're working on the small stuff, but not the big stuff. And so
correct.
Everybody, I think what Jason is really saying is you've got to have an altimeter for your customer centricity. What altitude are you at? Are you declining or are you climbing? And of course, very soon thereafter that, you better have the same for your employee centricity, because we just spent 30 minutes talking about how one becomes the other. And
Correct.
So how do you measure your culture? Leo, final thoughts for our listeners?
I think the final thought, I think we made an interesting pivot, and there could be a whole other show in terms of the things that we should be focusing on, the things we shouldn't be focusing on.
Yes.
So that's a whole other wax there.
Yeah, watch this space, everybody. That one's coming. Jason, final thoughts?
Oh, this is my passion. Our organization operates this on a daily basis. Right? And if you really truly want to be customer centric, then make sure that the customer and the customer experience is actually implemented into your operational decisions.
Yeah, beautiful. And there we have it, everybody. Another episode of stuff that is easy to talk about and hard to do. If you want to join other like-minded people who are on that journey of doing it and doing it well, come on over to the One Advantage community and join us there. We'll look forward to having you here for another episode in the coming weeks.
Thanks for listening to the One Advantage podcast. If you liked this episode, please consider helping us by rating us wherever you listen, spreading the word, having us as a guest on your podcast or webinar, and mentioning us in social media. Find us at the One Advantage podcast, where you can get more information about us and this episode. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to more great episodes to come.